Are you speak? I think you're. I can't hear
There
you.
we go.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I am Rosalind Brown of Your Wealth Guidance, where we provide Black women with the tools that they need or we need in order to have financial independence and live life on your own terms. And so, as usual, we come to you with resources, examples, folks who are already doing the damn thing, and so I'm happy for our guest today. It's funny when we were prepping for this, we went from like this topic to this topic to this topic. So we're gonna try and stay on one or two topics. We'll see if we can fit just one or two topics because there were so many different things, and I think this is kind of the gift of when you really open yourself up to opportunity and the what next and the what could be. All of a sudden, you're like, wait, I can do this, I can do that, I can make this happen. So that's kind of where the conversation went. And so today, we have Royal Williams with us. And Royal is in one of my favorite places. She is in Colombia. And if y'all haven't been to Colombia, please put it on your list. She's in Medellin. And I was there last year. And when I say it was like super, it was one of those places that are just like super easy. Like just but she is a former educator and the founder of Yep, She Travels, a company that creates safe spaces for women to experience the world through group travel. She curates unique cultural experiences that encourage authentic immersion, time for self care, we all need that, and organic and meaningful connections with like minded women. Currently, her trips are focused on Afro-Colombian history and Colombia, where Royal has lived for over 7 years as a teacher. And currently, she is preparing to apply for doctoral programs in clinical psychology. Like, girl, we need that.
Yes.
And so it's like it's the evolution. Um, and so I want to start off by just like tell us your story. How did you end up in Colombia? I know everybody's like here in the States doing their thing,
Right.
and then it's like where, why, how? So how did you make that transition? How did you make that step?
Well, first, I want to say thank you for having me on your platform. I'm really excited to talk about my story and to talk about Colombia and how I ended up here. And it kind of goes like this, to be honest. So I ended up going abroad to Spain when I was in college. And that was the first time I really fell in love with being outside of the US. And when I came back to the US, everything just kind of seemed a lot more gray. And so I was a journalism communications major at the time. And I figured it was going to be quicker for me to get out and be done with college with a Spanish degree. So I switched. And then I was a broke college student. So what I ended up doing was finding a way to do the study abroad thing or go abroad thing for a cheap way. And I looked at Peace Corps, I looked at all these things, and I found this program that was in Colombia and was like, hey, come here for about a year and teach English. And because it was a relatively low fee and I would recuperate that with a small stipend and they paid for housing, I was like, oh, well, I could kind of go down there broke ish and be okay. And so about 2 weeks after I graduated, I started the program in Colombia, the volunteer teaching program. And I was supposed to be there for a year and I stayed for over 7.
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
And so, like, one thing people are always like, so to be a teacher, do you have to have experience? So you were coming straight out of school. Do you have to have experience, know what the heck you're doing? Like, do you have to have like experience working with children or a certain grade level? Like, what are the kind of the requirements to just get started?
So, depending on the country, sometimes you don't have to have a college degree, but a lot of them, they at least want you to go to college and have some type of degree for visa purposes. But some of the programs you can do volunteer programs. They don't really require teaching experience per se. Usually, they want you to have some form of native English, or they would like you to have a decent level of English to be a volunteer. If you are, though, wanting to teach and you have a little bit of teaching experience, you could even apply to some of the private schools. So, what I was able to do with my teaching experience at the time, Columbia wasn't as popular. So, they really needed native English teachers. And so I was able to kind of get into a good private school at the time as a teacher, and I didn't have much teaching experience. Um, and it was kind of like a learning as you go thing as well. And so if you really have your heart into it and you really want to do a good job, the jobs are there.
And then are you teaching multiple subjects? Or are you just teaching English? What does that look like?
So a lot of the times, if you want to teach science or if you want to teach math, you can do it. So I often had roommates that were social study teachers and they weren't English teachers, or they were math teachers or music teachers even. It all just depends what subject you want to focus in. But English for a lot of people would be one of the easiest ways to kind of get in there. Some places are kind of lacking for English teachers, and so they really want a native English accent. And so that kind of helps a little bit if you don't have as much teaching experience. And usually you would teach maybe one grade, one subject, but it honestly really depends.
And then in terms of pay, you can tell us what you make or what you made or all that kind of stuff. But like some people are saying, well, I don't know if I want to do this because is this going to be enough to like live and
Right.
sustain a lifestyle?
So
Is that
I was
like
22 at the time, right? And so I wasn't thinking about all that. I was like coming out of college. It was 2 weeks out of graduating, and for the volunteer side of it, it was definitely labor of love, and it wasn't much. But for the actual teaching in a private school side of it, the salary that I made in Colombia was a relatively high salary for the country in general, because I was teaching at a private school and these are rich kids, like the top 1% kids. And so, for that reason, the salary was good to live here. If you want to teach in South America, those salaries are going to be a lot lower than if you go like to Asia. Dubai is the place where they really pay well and it's tax free. So it depends on where you are in the world, but also those other countries, since the pay is so high, it's a lot more competitive, and so you'll be competing against people that are licensed.
That's a really good point to make. And so in terms of like lifestyle, what was that especially for you, we're talking 7 years ago. What did that look like, that transition from the States? So you're in the States one day, American University, doing all the Americanized things, and then poof, now you're in another country. What Tell us about like that change of experience, and what did that do to you or make you feel?
So it was a huge culture shock, I will say. Nowadays I feel a lot more at home, but in the beginning it was very weird. For example, I mean, imagine having meetings at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and they're serious about it and they're awake. But then also at the same time, everybody knows to just come to that meeting 45 minutes, an hour late. So, and it's okay. And you're there bright and early at 6:30, and where's everybody? So that was a huge cultural shock. You think CP time is bad? I think Colombia CP time is worse. So adjusting to culture shocks like that was kind of hard in the beginning, but also then learning about the different foods and the different ways to communicate. I feel like Colombia, they have more of a passive way to communicate, and so learning that as well, and learning how to be less direct, because you never want it to come off the wrong way, especially in a work setting. And also having a certain amount of curiosity about the country. It was really good to be able to explore different parts of the country, but in a very backpacker friendly way. I was 22, and so there was a lot of hostels, there was a lot of taking buses, there was a lot of discovering the country in that kind of way.
As somebody said, I believe it. Living in Miami, she learned some things as well. So kind of that same culture type shock. And even that in terms of like how the students received you, how was that? They're like this black woman, obviously American. Like, how was that experience?
So I moved to Colombia in 2013, and at the time, I mean, there was no. The vice president right now is a black woman. She's darker than I am, or we're the same complexion. It's incredible. And at the time, though, what I noticed is there wasn't as much representation. There wasn't as much visibility for Afro-Colombians at the time. And so for them coming here and seeing me, especially in a position of like being a teacher, that was some of the first experiences some of my students have, the very wealthy students had, that where they were around a Black person that wasn't in servitude. And so it was really interesting to have students. I had one student that like was maybe third grader. He was really he like liked me a lot. You could tell he was really affectionate towards me because his nanny was Black. And so it was stuff like that. Or them saying stuff like calling me negrita, morena, and like me asking like really what's the difference, and like these kids innocently saying it's something like there is a difference that's not so, I guess, nice. Or them saying something ignorant and them not realizing because they're only repeating it from what their parents were saying. Or being in the country, and I remember one time I was on the subway or the metro system, and I had an iPhone 4, and somebody was like, "A Black person with an iPhone." And it's
Gosh.
yeah, stuff like that, because there wasn't really a lot of visibility. There wasn't a lot of representation of Black people in Colombia at the time that had wealth. Now there's been so many of us who have moved here, started businesses here. Um, there are a lot of Black travelers that come here, and so now it's a different thing when I walk around Cartagena, and I used to get ignored, but now they see me and it's like, oh, my sister, my color, like shop for me, like buy stuff from me. So it's been interesting to see that transition over the last 10 years.
And I think that's a good point. And we were chatting about this before about community.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the main reasons why people are hesitant. They're like, I'm in the States. My cousin lived down the street. My mama lived around the corner. I have my circle here.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you were able to build community and what that looks like in Colombia, especially because none of your family is in Colombia with you, correct?
At all. Mm-mm. Yeah, definitely here for myself, which is it's been fine. So I would say the most rewarding time that I've had in Colombia so far has been when I've been able to connect with other Black women here in Medellin. Before there wasn't really a lot of us here. Now there's tons of us in Medellin, and so about a year and a half ago, I was here. Maybe 2 years ago, I was here by myself, and I just so happened to run into a girl by accident who introduced me to another Black woman. And we realized, like, oh, we've been looking for each other, but we couldn't find each other. And so one of the women, she started a WhatsApp group. Now, that WhatsApp group was a chance for us to connect. Every time somebody came into the country, they would join and join. And so we started building community, we started hanging out, and we started kind of like forming this sisterhood where we support each other. And that has changed just everything. Anytime we need hair recommendations, anytime we see something, oh, we can buy these type of products at this store, it's like little stuff like that. um, or if can you bring me something from the States, it's something like that. It's the little community that we've been able to build just based off of a WhatsApp group. And now this group, it started off with like maybe 20, and now there's so many people coming in and out. There's over 300 now in the WhatsApp group, and it's very active. And it's been a really good place to build community and not feel so alone.
And I think that's huge because I know that's probably one of the biggest fears or the biggest things of like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I should.
Right.
I don't know if this makes sense.
Right.
Because what have you seen in terms of people who have moved? Have they moved and stayed? Have they moved and, brought their family with them? Like, what does that look like in terms of the people that you've encountered that have come down, even if it's just for a short period of time?
Yes, a lot of people here are transient, but I never really pay that any mind because Medellin, there's something about Medellin that just draws you in. And it's really hard to explain it unless you just come here. There's some type of energy. And so people will come here for a week, they'll extend for a month. Next thing you know, they're bringing their families, or next thing you know, they're staying for 3 months, 6 months. So people are always extending. People are always finding a way to stay because at least Medellin, I can speak for it, just there's something here. And now that there's community here as well and people aren't alone, it makes it even more enticing for people to stay.
And so if someone were saying, okay, you've made it sound very appealing, I want to come down, I want to teach, how would they go about doing that? Like, what would those steps look like?
So first, I would make sure that if you were trying to teach in Colombia, I believe you do need to have a bachelor's degree. So that's one. Depending on if you are a certified teacher, if you are a certified teacher, I would say go and start applying to the top jobs. And what I do is, and I also have a YouTube video that kind of explains every step and like even the website you can go to. But what I did was one of the things I would do was go on a map in the city, and it's the schools are usually in a different color, and so I would just look at that, research that school, and see if it's a good fit. If it's a private school, for example, that means higher salary. There's also a website where you can go to that shows the top schools in Colombia. So that's another place, and you just start sending your resume. Just keep sending and sending. Also in the video, there's like it talks about times of year when you should apply. One time I got a job just because the principal was like, I need to go on vacation. I need to hire somebody tomorrow. So, stuff like that. If you don't have a license, like I do now have a teaching credential, but before I didn't. So, if you don't have one, there's actually some places in smaller cities that you can go to if you want to make English teaching abroad your profession. You start off at the small little cities that a lot of people won't go to, but they want native English teachers, and then you get your experience there, and then you can move on. Another way is there's volunteer programs that you can go to. The government used to have one. You have to check to see if SENA, SENA, is still active, but that is one way, at least in Colombia. And then if you don't want to go to Colombia, there's other countries like Korea that have government programs that you can, sign up for, and that gives you support, in-country support, resources, and a decent salary.
Now, I think that's a really good point. So, if people are like, okay, I'm gonna try this out, so they can try it out without making the full investment to
Right.
get licensed and so forth. But what if they don't want to teach kids? So what if they like, I don't know if I want to be around, third graders, fourth graders? Do they have programs for maybe adults or older kids?
Oh, so in my experience, if you want to teach older kids, you have to rough it a little bit. You're kind of more on your own. From my understanding, there's not really programs that are focused on solely that are dedicated to just teaching adults. Some people in my volunteer program were placed in universities, but a lot of the people when I had my like private school job, a lot of the foreigners that came down and didn't have experience, they were working at language institutions. And so they would have to bus across the city or go to a building and teach, and it wasn't as structured. It maybe wasn't as stable. The pay wasn't as good. So you do have to rough it a little bit more, and you have to have a little bit of grit, and you have to put some elbow grease to make it work, as opposed to being in a program where you have a coordinator that takes care of everything for you, and they help where the clinics are, or emergency contacts, and like they structure stuff for you, and maybe even help you find housing.
So that is a pretty big difference. And you talked about like falling in love with Medellin. For people who don't know, most people who know Colombia, they know like Cartagena, which that is like it's like the Miami type feel. And so the Mia talked about, she had some time in Miami. That's exactly what Cartagena kind of felt like to me. So tell us a little bit for those who haven't been, like, what is there to love? Why did you just absolutely love it and enjoy it and, want to spend the last 7 years there?
So actually, I've only been in Medellin for the last since 2021, and I was able to go to different cities. I went to a smaller town that was yeah, it was more small town on the coast, which is a different vibe. And then I used to live in Bogota, which is huge city, lots of stuff to do, kind of like a New York. But I think Medellin is where I have decided to just stay because it's almost like if you could think of a city in the U.S. that it's it's spread out enough so that you're not all on top of each other. There's not as much traffic, so you could still get places. And then it's trying to catch up to like the big brother Bogota with culture and theater and music. And so it's you're in this type of a period of where everything is just happening right now. More music festivals, more artists coming here, and so there's a lot more to do without the hustle and bustle of Bogota. So it's like having like a New York without all the busyness of New York, but you get the New York energy and fun. If that makes sense.
So, and I know I've heard this when I was going, I went solo. And people who know me know I do a lot of solo travel and whatever. And people were like, safety, the cartel is going to be coming for you and all that kind of stuff. What can you say about the safety and your experience in terms of how safe have you felt in the country?
Yes. So if I had $1 for every time somebody mentioned safety in Colombia, I would be pretty rich. Um, so what I will say is this: as a foreigner, there are certain financial benefits that you have because if you have dollars or euros or whatever, it's going to go farther. So that allows you to be in maybe areas that wouldn't be as impacted by certain types of violence. Um, in general, also being a Black woman in Medellin or in Colombia, people are going to think that you're from Colombia. People think you're Colombian. If you don't speak Spanish, then that gives it away. So that helps a lot. Um, I will say though, for me to just say that this place is just 100% safe, that's just not true. No place is. Um, it's one of those places where you have to make sure that you are moving correctly. You're not going to walk outside looking lost with your cell phone. Just don't do anything like that. You don't want to put any extra attention on you because they have this phrase called no dar papaya. It's like don't give papaya. And papaya, don't no dar papaya is basically like don't give anybody a chance to get you. Don't get got. Don't give any opportunity, basically.
It's just like
And
being a large city. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And so it's like when I guess mention that to people, you just have to move like you're in a regular city, move like you have some sense, then you'll be okay. That's usually what it is.
So that's good to know. That's always that was like the first thing. Like everybody thought, they were gonna be like dealing cocaine next to me or something. And I'm like, if you're in a major US city, you're probably kind of prepared for it overall. Now,
Exactly.
one thing that you talked about is kind of going around to some of the different places and that experience as well. So a little bit about like how easy is it to move around the country?
So it's pretty easy because flights are inexpensive. So if you want to fly from Medellin to Cartagena, you can find like a $25 one-way ticket, and that's like an hour, hour and a half flight. Not too bad.
It's
If you want to,
crazy.
it's right. You could bus it. It'll be a lot more inexpensive, but I don't know what it is. I think it's because of the windiness of the roads or the mountains. But like 500 miles takes so long. So you could get on a comfortable bus, but you'll probably be in the bus for like 14 hours,
Oh
15
my
hours for
God.
500 miles maybe, or maybe less, I don't know, 10. But it's a long time when you could just take an hour flight for like 25-30 bucks.
Oh my gosh. And so, due to your travel experience, you then developed your own travel business where you're really bringing, especially Black women together to kind of explore. And are they exploring to move? Are they just like, I got to get up out the country. I need to get away. Like, which one is the focus? And who are you seeing more of?
So far, I'm seeing more of the explore just to get to know. But there's a couple that have come on some of the group trips and they work remotely, and I'm just like, come on, I'm here. You have this resource here. Just utilize me. I will help you. I'm like begging them to just please come. But a lot of it though is a lot of them are solo travelers who want to actually go with people, but they can't get anybody to commit to coming with them. They want to actually kind of build a connection with other women who also are travelers. They want to find their travel buddies. So, but also go back home, a lot of them. And so they're able to come on the trips and kind of make new connections. And I don't know, something about just being abroad with strangers, it kind of like speeds up the get to know you process, and it allows for them to, I don't know, just form friendships or form connections a lot quicker, I believe, than just being in the States and meeting, at a bar or something.
And so, for those who are currently remote workers, how remote work friendly is Colombia? Is it easy to be there for 90 days, a year, especially for those coming from the U.S.? I know it might be different depending on what country you're coming from, but if someone is a U.S. citizen today and they're like, "Hey, my job said you can work from wherever you want to work," how easy is it for them to pick up their laptop and head on over to Colombia for a few months?
It's very easy. So it's you can stay 90 days at a time, and then you can apply for a 90-day extension. And also because there's so many digital nomads, foreigners, especially from the U.S. in Medellin. If you know somebody that knows somebody, they can tell you to apply for this or do that or talk to these people. So then you can figure out how can you make staying for longer work. And so there's lots of ways. But if you don't know somebody, also the government quite recently just rolled out a digital nomad visa, and you only need to prove that you make $700 a month,
Wow.
and you can get a visa for up to 2 years.
Oh, that's huge.
Yes, it is huge.
Yeah,
So,
that's side hustle money. So that's definitely easy. Is it easy also to start a business or work in Colombia?
so the work part is a little bit more difficult. So most of my visas at first were working visas, and it was a lot easier because I was working for big schools. And usually, if you need to get a work visa, your job has to prove that they have enough money to take care of a foreigner. So that could be a big burden. Also, the salaries in Colombia, it's better to work abroad. So it's not even worth getting a work visa unless you were, I don't know, a principal at a really good school and you can get, a USA comparable type salary. So I would say that's less likely for that to happen. And then also with the work visa, if you do get fired or you quit, I think you only have 30 days left on your visa or something like that, and you have to get
Oh,
out.
wow.
Maybe it's less, so it wouldn't be the best option. But wait, what was the other part? There's so much.
To like even start a business. So
Oh,
I know some people have talked about, you go to another business, maybe they doing hair. So maybe they're the person you go to get your hair done or whatever. How easy is it to establish a business in Colombia?
I would say not as easy. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of kind of bureaucracy, and there's a lot of cultural growing pains that you kind of have to go through in order to get that established. First, you would have to have some type of ID as well, and even getting through, like going through that process. That's something I'm not the expert though on businesses in Colombia, but I do know a few people that have started it, and just in general, when it comes to paperwork or any type of process, you got to be very patient because it's not going to be as easy as maybe back home.
That makes sense. Now, in terms of like, okay, you only got to show you make $700 a month, but can you
Mhm.
live off $700 a month in Colombia? Like, what does that look like? What is okay accommodation? So we ain't talking about the most bougie type accommodations, and definitely not a hard a soft mat on a hard floor type accommodations. But what would something kind of maybe middle of the road look like?
So if you want to come down here just for like a month, the best bet would probably be Airbnb. At the moment, Airbnb is highly inflated in Medellin because they know that people are coming down here. So I think maybe I could speak on like what it should be and maybe what it is for the moment, or what you can get in a different city. So if you go on the coast, for example, you can get a decent apartment on Airbnb, probably 2 bedrooms for like $500 or less.
Oh, wow.
Um, if you come to Medellin, depending on the area, you'll probably get like a 1 bedroom for at least $500. But that's wildly inflated.
Like,
uh,
what? That's inflated. That's probably why it's inflated because people are like 500. Here's my 500.
exactly. And I believe the minimum salary in Colombia is like is it $400, $300 or something like that. So some people have these houses in decent areas that they've had in the family, and they furnish them, and they're able to make a monthly salary like nothing. So I'm not mad at it at all. Like it's the price that you have to pay if you want to come down here and basically overpay, but that's the name of the game. Um, but food though, I went to the fruit store the other day and I got like a whole bunch of food for the week. And my bill came up to, I think it was $10. And this is for
Oh, wow.
potatoes and zucchinis and pineapples and watermelon. And I mean, I wish I had the picture here to show you how much food I got for $10. And if
And a
you want,
watermelon is $10. Just a
it's so the sticker shock going back home is it's no, I can't. I look, it's like $2 for avocado. How? That's you can get so much for that for $2 at the fruit store in Colombia.
I think that's a good point. So coming back, what is when you come back to the States, what are some of the things that you're like, okay, I do miss this? Or what are some things that are like, I absolutely am happy I don't have to deal with this anymore? One is probably food prices.
Oh, it's mind-boggling how food is so expensive, and it's not even good food. I automatically gain weight if I eat the same stuff in the U. Oh wait, sorry, that's going off topic. That's a whole that's a whole other. But no, yeah, food prices. But what the thing that I miss is being able to just find any type of hair products. It's better than it used to be, but like just being able to just get anything that you need, a lot of variety, and it's it's good. It's That's what I miss. And then I miss how just extra our grocery stores are. I didn't realize how just we really it's too much. But I love it. Just
It's like you can buy everything, anything and everything.
anything. I didn't realize how many flavors of barbecue sauce that we have until I was lacking it. I was like, wait, what do you mean you don't have like honey mustard barbecue and with sriracha, lime, mesquite, like,
And low salt and sodium.
and then you come to Colombia and it's just like barbecue.
Barbecue sauce. Do you want barbecue sauce or not? That's it.
Right. Or even and I guess it's a little it's very frivolous, but I really like prepackaged salads that are like already washed and stuff, and you just go grab it, and that doesn't really exist here like that. And so that's like the little stuff like that. It's what I miss. But everything else, like the stress and the anxiety from being back home, or not so much.
And that's a good point. Ujo says it's $10 for 3 avocados in Chicago. Girl,
Right. I will. It's
yeah, you can't share a guacamole on
No,
$10.
not at all.
You
Like
like
I love you, but no.
get y'all. And that's a good segue because we talked about this because people move for a number of different reasons. And the whole premise of our community is really putting women in a situation of power. So you can pivot your life if you are stressed on the job to be in a situation where you can walk away. If you are stressed at home, you can walk away. If you are tired of working, need a moment, just want to, rest, relax, read a book, write a book, whatever it might be. And a lot of that is because of where you are. And you talked about the transition in terms of stress and the day-to-day stress that you were having in your move. Tell us a little bit about like what that transition and especially over time. And I know this is where your education is. So you're like studying yourself and studying formally at the same time. Tell us how that transition or that move has made such an impact on your kind of mental, you talked about your physical health, but just overall.
So it wasn't until recently that I actually sat down and kind of reflected on, because I'm trying to become a psychologist, and so one of the things they tell you to do in school is to go to therapy. So I started therapy, but in like 20 during the pandemic basically. And during the pandemic is really stressful time. I was in the States. I moved to Colombia, and then I was able to really just be more intentional about who I was with. And about, like I mentioned before, about 3 months, 3 to 4 months after moving to Colombia, that's when I, discovered there was more Black women in Medellin. And that's when we, formed the group and started hanging out. And so I realized that this community that I was able to be a part of, and on top of working from home and being very intentional with who I spent my time with, turned out to be the biggest accidental blessing in disguise because I realized that I was able to be outside of microaggressions, and I was able to kind of be outside of those seemingly small stressors that are actually so big. And for the first time, I was able to kind of see who I was and experience myself outside of this lens, or outside of this, this lens that's just basically projected on me when I'm in the States. And then being around other women who you don't have to explain certain things about hair or taking your shoes off when you come in the house, like stuff, just stuff like that. Like they know not to touch your hair and other you. uh I didn't realize that was something that I was missing and I desperately needed. And I needed that basically it was over a year of just of a break for me to really realize, wow, I needed to be outside of that environment that was so toxic. And I feel so much more relief being over here now because I don't have to be with that on a daily.
I think that's huge. Like, I always think it's one of those things that sometimes you don't know you're sick until you get well.
Yeah.
And so you don't know, like, this stress was killing me, or this stress was the reason why I always had headaches, or why my back always hurts, or,
Right.
shoulders. Because, like, depending on where you place your stress.
Mhm.
And I love the topic of self care and how much value we're putting on self care and the investment in ourselves. But then, how do we make that happen? Like, how do you protect your peace and create that circle? What are you thinking in terms of it? Was it just creating and having the community? Was it the type of community? Was it the therapy on top of that? What do you think were kind of the maybe top two or three things that really put you to a point where you're like, I'm feeling like I'm healing?
I would say community and therapy, because what I actually talked to my therapist about this today. I realized that once I wasn't dealing with racial trauma on a more consistent basis, I was actually able to talk about something else in therapy. I was actually able there. I had the space and I had, I guess, the bandwidth to think about something else, to work on myself in other areas, because dealing with that, it's exhausting. And there's so many people that talk about just after a work week, they feel so exhausted. It's because it's literally like being in a type of war zone every day, because our bodies, our minds receive certain things like racially sensitive, not sensitive, like microaggressions, racial microaggressions, as if you're being punched in the stomach, or
Mm.
like it's a physical hit. And so it's not by accident that we're so drained by all these different things, and that our minds are so preoccupied and our bodies are so preoccupied with these things, because it's a really major thing, even though it's called a microaggression.
Now, I think one of the big things is we're always like, I think it's the evil that you know. So people are like, listen, I know the states, I know how to move here.
Yeah.
How is it, or how much in terms of racism or even sexism that you have experienced in Colombia, especially as a comparison?
Well, to be honest, a lot, just as much as living in the South, I would say, because I'm from California, and so it's a different type of over there. And then I moved to Alabama, and then I lived in Texas, and so I was like, oh yeah, it's a lot more, it's more obvious here, or
Different down here.
right, you can feel it in the air a little bit more. And then coming to Colombia, it's I always call it like, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing, like it's like the polite passive one. So it's like the comments that are offhand that people don't realize are just drenched in prejudice and ignorance. Like I remember one time I had a bun in my hair after wearing it like really big like this, and my bun looked terrible. It was just like just I need to go to the store and leave. And because they saw me with my hair up, they're like, "Wow, so elegant." And I was like, "Now you know I look a hot mess right now." But it was their way of saying like, "No, like I don't want your hair, like, I don't like your hair out." So stuff like that. Or um like on the coast there's a little bit more catcalling, and so that I find it's a lot better than what it used to be. But yeah, stuff like that. And then but I think again with the visibility, and people's understanding and people's proximity to different types of Black folks from all over the world that are coming here, I think that's also changing people's perspective. And I think there's also a strong movement in Colombia too that's talking about, you know, embracing your natural hair. So you have more women now that are wearing their hair out in curly or in braids, and it's pride. It's something about pride, as before it was something with shame.
Oh, wow. And I think, do you think it could be something of a mix between here you're dealing with racism, but more than likely, even from an economic perspective, it's like, yeah, you still don't make enough money to get respect. And in Colombia, yes, you might be darker skinned, but if you have a little bit more money, you've kind of purchased a little bit more respect than what you might have in the States.
Yes, I would say that's absolutely the case for sure. I would say also having American passport, I've noticed that has shielded me from certain types of discrimination. So when I talk to Afro-Colombians and like what they face versus what I've faced here or what over 7 years, it's completely different. But I also compare it to my grandmother. She was from Jamaica. So she never grew up othered. My other grandmother's from Birmingham. And so
So,
growing up and seeing those two sides of what being a Black woman is in America, I didn't realize how my grandmother moved in America because she was born in Jamaica. So she always walked into a room like she belonged. Like, because why not? So I feel like that's kind of like what happens when I come to Colombia, because it's not my country. I don't know the history of racism as much as colonialism like I do like the U.S. So my automatic assumption is like when I walk into a room here, I belong because why not? Like it's not my home, so I don't know all the rules and stuff like that. And so I feel like that plus the economic advantage for me personally has helped.
I think that is huge. And just that, I almost feel like that's a whole nother conversation because, especially in the States, we look at the difference of how people who are first generation here versus multiple generations here, and either the mobility or, the investment in education and all those kind of things. And I love that. And I think that's kind of the beauty of living somewhere else so you can see things with a whole new vision.
Mhm.
Because do you think that is kind of indicative of everyone's experience, or kind of, especially your circle, when you talk about your immediate circle of women who've moved there, are they feeling that kind of similar thought or experience?
So I for the so there's some women that talked about growing up in Atlanta, and because they grew up in Atlanta, they didn't have to search out, for community and and Black women or Black folks in general because that was just there. So then coming here, it's like a little bit different. They get a different perspective. But from other people like me who grew up in California, where it was very mixed and stuff, been hearing the kind of a similar sentiment. But the thing that's kind of been the same, I would say, is the economic part of it.
So I think that's a very big difference. I think
Mhm.
that's maybe an experience not everyone can say that they've had, being
Yeah.
looked at with kind of a higher set of respect or esteem.
Yes,
Just
that's exactly what it is. It is a level of status because there's also a level of curiosity. It's like, oh, well, you speak English. That's cool. I don't speak English. And, oh, you are from this country. I might like this country. So that's cool. And so it automatically gives you this level of, yeah, I think the word is status, or this level of just, I don't know, is respect the word, but people do treat you differently when you're seen as more of like like a fetishized or exotic type of thing in a way. I don't know. And I think it's something really weird to experience, at least for myself, for the first time. Like, why 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 do you care? Why aren't you presuming, A, B, or C? And so that's also very helpful to be able to see yourself outside of just that lens that's been put on us in the States.
And that's a good thought, or kind of question in terms of how people are seeing you and perceiving and receiving you. How has dating been? Is that a weird experience or a brand new experience of like, I don't want to be the first? the first American you've ever encountered, or whatever that might be.
So I would say that as an American woman, you'll be like seen as exotic and it's curious. I like to go on the dating apps. I used to date a lot in Bogota because a lot of people come in and out, and I was living there, and it was just so nice to just meet people from all over the world. A lot of the times, though, I would end up like if I'm chatting with somebody from here, it would be like, oh well, I've never, been with a black woman before. I've never kissed a black woman before,
How
sir.
That's not a compliment.
That, right? What are you doing? But I will say, dating in Colombia is fun. I would say that, Col- from what I've heard and experienced, even people might call, and you know how people joke about like Jamaican men or people joke about Nigerian men. I would say Colombians would be up in that. So you're gonna have fun, but just there's cultural differences, especially with maybe fidelity that you might not appreciate. And I
Oh
don't want to get in
my
trouble for saying that, but like it's just what it is. There's certain you're not when you date here, you're not really in your it's you're not in your home turf. You're the visitor. And so what you think what you think, the games that you could play, you can't play them the same here because you're not on your home turf. So
Yeah, that's one of the things. It's like, all right, everybody not gonna be the same. Whole
but
other
it's
culture.
fun.
You got to figure out what you got to deal with, what you can't
Exactly.
deal with. Those kind of things.
Exactly. And some people
You
come here and they leave with a spouse, and some people leave with, I don't know, a good story.
experience.
So,
Well, experience. Yeah.
yes.
Now, do you think it's important to either learn Spanish before you get there or immediately upon arrival in order to really kind of immerse yourself and really, have time with the locals and to get kind of some of the respect with the locals and those kind of things?
Yeah, I think it's really good to try to come here with a level of Spanish. Even though more people are coming here and more people are starting to speak English, it is good to have some phrases in your back pocket. But then there's also a lot of opportunities here where you can do really immersive and not immersive, intense courses in Spanish. So, like, I would say, get here, hit the ground running, and you should be okay. But also, speaking of dating in Spanish, my experience, the best way to learn Spanish is to date somebody that doesn't speak English.
Oh my gosh.
So if you want to date and learn Spanish, just hit two birds with one stones, and there you have it.
I can't even imagine how is a date when you're speaking English and they're speaking Spanish? Are you just like on the translator app or what?
That's really what it is. So a lot of men, and that's a whole other discussion. But a lot of men come down here, and so you'll go to the club, and you'll have some of the women don't speak English and they don't speak Spanish, and it's literally the whole night just with their phones, just passing back the translator. But somehow it works.
I mean,
So I don't know. It could be me, but it works for people.
I mean, how much worse is that than men who only text or some of the conversations of people who don't have great conversation anyway? So you're like, what difference does it make?
I force the voice notes, so I don't have those problems.
I think it's just a really good point because it is a totality and people are moving at different stages of their life. Because when you look at some of the women that you moved at 22. And so I'm sure there's somebody watching and they're like, girl, I'm 50. This is a different conversation. And
Mhm.
so what does that range of expats look like that are a part of the community that you're seeing there now? And kind of where are they in life? Are they just retiring? Are they bringing their family? Are they just leaving college like you at 22? What does that range look like? Because I think sometimes people are like, yeah, she did it because she was young.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. So I think nowadays, because Medellin has become this really just this digital nomad hub, this business hub, this starting to be a tech hub. There's a lot of people that are deciding that this is a place that's suitable to retire. And so in the group, just the whole group, of the community that we have. You have people that are up there in age, you have people that are retirement age in the US that come down here and they get a retirement visa. And then you have families that are coming down here that are settling down. There's also specific groups. So there's like the main group, and then like the subgroups of moms that are down here with their children that are able to get support about what do you do about schools, what neighborhood should I live in with my kid, what should I do with my kids. And it's also they're their own babysitters, and so there's a lot of support for people that are that weren't 22 and just like a little impulsive coming down here, or just really making a way to come down here. There's people that are planning. There's people that are planning for retirement. There's people that have bought apartments here because they're going to stay here forever. And it's all kinds of, from the financially irresponsible to the responsible as well.
Now, what about you? What is in your plan? So you've spent 7 years. So you've,
Yeah.
been on one side, another side. What do you see Colombia as your future, or do you have some other stops you want to make?
Yes. Okay. Well, I try to leave Colombia and I keep coming back. So I feel like I'm going to be here for a while. And so that's one of the reasons why I started my business here as well, with the tours for women. And then also, when I get into my doctoral program, one of the things that I want to work on, I want to focus on Black I want to focus on expats, Black expats that are leaving, and I would love to be able to come back to Colombia and do my research here. And so I feel like Colombia is like a second home to me. I'm so comfortable here. I don't see myself going to a different place for too long and then abandoning Colombia. No, I just don't see it happening. I love it too much here.
And that's the thing. So people are they're able to book tours with you. These are group trips that you've already curated.
Yes.
So is this someone that's saying, I want to come down to Colombia, book me something, or is this you have a trip that's already scheduled and they want to come hang out with you?
So right now it's the scheduled trips that I'm doing. So this is the second time that I'm doing one in Medellin. Last year it was around the same time. This year it's June. And this year it's a little bit different because of, especially because I've been able to connect with the community more. It's very much Afro-Colombian focused. Now, one of the things people don't realize about Colombia is the population of Black folks here is the second highest, I think, outside of, I think of Brazil, I think on this side of the world, or at least this continent. I got to look at the stats. I don't know, but it's high. There's lots of us here. And when you think about Medellin, you don't think about the Afro-Colombian population. Yet their stories, because of displacement, because of the violence with Pablo Escobar. I mean, you've seen Narcos, and they were very much affected deeply by that story, but you didn't see us there. And so the idea is to amplify those voices, especially across the African diaspora, because some of the stories, even Cartagena, it is like a Miami. But if you go to Palenque, which is the first free town of the Americas, it's a whole other thing. And you get to, hear stories about resilience, about kings, about kind of like what I talked about before, about preserving our safe space and peace for the well-being of our people. And that is a story that is told in Palenque. And so the idea is to amplify these type of stories because they are so valuable and they need to be heard. And I think now with the vice president as well being an Afro-Colombian, the representation and the amplification of those people, it's happening.
And then if someone wants to join you on that trip in June, is there still space available?
There is space available, but you're gonna have to swipe them up quickly. And I'm a solo traveler as well. And so what I make sure to do is, if you don't have anybody to travel with, you have a roommate. So we do roommate matching as well. And so you don't have to worry about doing like a single occupancy, because I know as a solo traveler, people don't come with you sometimes. So
And so, how would they book that if they're like, you know what, I'm gonna come down there and hang out with y'all? How would they book that? Is it a website or?
yes, my website is Yep She Travels. It's YUP She Travels.com. And that's also all my socials like Instagram, TikTok, Yep She Travels. And so if you want to go, if you want to specifically go to Medellin, it's YupSheTravels.com/Medellin. And that's where you can book book your spot for our trip. So I'm most excited that because we're going to have it's called a Black Joy Parade. And if you heard the music, if you close your eyes, you would think that you were in New Orleans. And so it's one of those surprising connections that we have across the diaspora that you would never think that you would get in Colombia, let alone Medellin.
I love that. Just one, that connection, because it's amazing how much we talk about and we know what was taken from us, but sometimes we forget how much we were able to preserve. So
Exactly.
like in Palenque, how they were able to preserve language, but
Hmm.
how, the music still carried on. And so even sometimes you
Hmm.
hear a song and you're like, wait, that sound like home.
Yes, and exactly. And it's also interesting because different parts of the country, and not to digress too much, but different parts of the country, depending on how heavily they had to integrate into like Catholicism, for example, you could see certain traditional African practices blended with Catholicism. And so it looks a certain way in one part of the country, but if you go to Palenque, it's a different way. If you come to Medellin, it's a different way. And so it's there's a whole lot to learn.
Hey, go and get y'all ticket. Yep, she travels.com. Join the group, get that information. I think it gives you a certain amount of pride, but also if you're just like, I don't know, maybe I want to, maybe I want to see if this makes sense for me. And if you are like me, I'm like, I don't know about group travel. Give it a try.
Exactly.
Give it a try.
Yeah, one of the things that ended up happening is the last trip that I did, I ended up finding my own travel buddy in the trip that I hosted. So we're going in a couple weeks. We're going to go see Beyonce in Brussels. So she was
Hey.
able to, right. So through the trip, she was able to find her travel buddy and me mine, and there we go.
Oh, I love it. And I know we're right up against time. And so, share with us any kind of last things as people are thinking about, one, should they use teaching as a way to leave and a
Mhm,
way to get to another country? And then just taking that opportunity to leave the States to
mhm.
have just a little more peace in their overall life. So, kind of give us a mix of the two.
So, first, I would say that teaching is a huge responsibility, and it is a good way for you to move abroad. But it's also it's a it's a work. It's a work of it's labor of love is what I mean. And so, if it's something that you feel like you can really give your all to, because it can be one of the hardest things that you do, it can be one of the most draining things that you can do. But if you feel like you're up for that, I would say that teaching is a really good way to experience the world. And I would say do it through government programs. If it's not Colombia, there's Korea does it. I think Spain does one. I think a quick Google search, you can Google government teaching programs, try it that way. But just know that it's not going to be the easiest thing, but it'll be really rewarding. And then the second part of that question, what was it?
And then especially for people who are on the fence, like I don't know if how do they feel confident that leaving is going to give them a better life than what they may have today in the States.
So I would say if you're at the point right now where you feel drained because of the rat race, if you feel like you don't belong in the hustle culture and you need a break, if you feel like you're underwater, I would say that maybe that's time to reevaluate some things. I would say that maybe it's a time to see what is not working and see if you see somebody that is doing it abroad that has a similar situation as you and try that. I didn't, like you mentioned earlier, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what I was missing until it was gone from me. And I realized, wow, I'm a much better person. I'm much more at peace. Not just because I'm abroad, that's a part of it as well, but because I was more intentional about the type of energy and the type of people I was around and the type of experience that I was having. And there's different ways that you can move abroad if you feel like you can't afford it. There's people that you can reach out to. I do a little bit of consulting as well, that you can talk to me about ways that you can come down here. And so if you just need that push, if you need just that person to say, just try it, here it is. If you needed that sign, here it is.
I love it. Now, how can they contact you? Should it be on the yepshetravels.com or is it another way to contact you? Is that the best way?
Yes, yep, shetravels.com. I have a WhatsApp number. People use WhatsApp for everything down here. So just for all professional everything in Colombia. So you should have a WhatsApp just saying. And then also Instagram. I'm always people are always DMing me about a lot of things, and so I'll respond as well.
I love it. I want to thank you for joining us. We got a lot of good conversation going on in the chat too. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. And Royal, you said that you also have a YouTube channel. Tell us your YouTube channel as well.
Yep, she travels.
And so, on that note, head on over there, check out hers as well. And as always, I want to thank you for joining us, Royal, and thank you all
Thank
for
you for
joining us
having me.
as well. Have a great night.
See ya.